Have you ever heard of a baby waking up at her own funeral? It sounds like a myth, the kind of story whispered in hushed tones by those who want to believe in miracles. But for 19-year-old Tamara Grande, it wasn't a story. It was a moment that split her life in two. 1 second, she was collapsed over the casket of her newborn triplets, mourning what she believed were three small, lifeless bodies. The next, a nurse screamed, a heartbeat, a twitch. One of her daughters had opened her eyes, and in doing so exposed a truth so devastating it would shake an entire hospital system to its core. It began in the middle of a storm. Rain lashed against the windows of Mercy Hospital as Dr. Elaine Pence rushed down the sterile corridor. The air was thick with antiseptic, and the tension was unbearable. Tamara Grande had just undergone an emergency cesarean after severe complications. Only 28 weeks pregnant, her body had endured too much, too fast. The triplets, three beautiful girls, had been born in critical condition. Their skin, a rich, deep brown, looked almost translucent under the harsh fluorescent lights. Their bodies were fragile, barely alive, barely moving. Nurse Janice, a veteran of the NICU ward, met Dr. Pence with fear in her eyes. "Are they going to make it?" she asked. Pence hesitated. That moment of silence, just a beat too long, would echo in the minds of every medical professional who witnessed what came next. Because within hours, the official report was in, all three babies had died. Their underdeveloped lungs, the hospital claimed, simply couldn't sustain life. Death certificates were signed. A grieving Tamara was told the truth, at least the version of the truth Mercy Hospital wanted her to believe. When Tamara awoke from surgery, she was told her babies were gone. Gone before they were named, gone before she had even held them. The father of the babies had already left months ago, disappearing when she refused to terminate her high-risk pregnancy. Her parents had cut her off, ashamed of her decision to keep them. Tamara had no one, just three names in her heart that would never belong to living children. She cried until the tears ran out, and then she just stared at the ceiling, numb, waiting for the funeral. Meanwhile, in the hospital morgue, Marlene Davis lit a cigarette beneath a yellow flickering light and tried to steady her trembling hands. She had worked in that morgue for 20 years. She thought she had seen everything, but nothing could prepare her for the moment she saw the tiniest of the three babies move. Just a flicker of the fingers at first. So small, so subtle, she thought her tired eyes had imagined it. Then it happened again. She ran. The cigarette dropped into a puddle, extinguished by the rain as she burst back inside, sprinting to the infant container. Her hands were shaking as she pressed two fingers against the baby's chest. It was faint, so very faint, but it was there. A heartbeat. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice cracking. She hit the emergency button and grabbed the phone. "This baby is alive." Back upstairs, Tamara lay motionless in her bed when the door creaked open. She didn't lift her head. She had no reason to. The pain of losing all three of her daughters had hollowed her out from the inside. But then she heard a voice. Dr. Pence. Her tone was different, uneasy. Behind her stood a police officer and a sharply dressed hospital administrator. "Ms. Grande," Dr. Pence began, her voice cracking. "Something has happened. Something unprecedented." Tamara turned, her body heavy with grief. "What now?" she asked, barely audible. "One of your daughters is alive." At first, she couldn't process the words. The room seemed to tilt. Her brain screamed that it was a cruel joke, another error, another way to prolong the suffering. "But you said they were all gone," Tamara whispered. "I know what we said," Dr. Pence interrupted, visibly shaken. "But we need to talk about that. Right now, your smallest daughter is in the NICU. She's critical, but she's fighting." Tamara's body moved on instinct. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain from her incision. "And the others?" she asked, a flicker of hope breaking through her exhaustion. Dr. Pence looked away. "I'm sorry, they didn't make it." A strange silence filled the room, thick and unbearable. Then the hospital administrator stepped forward. Her voice was calm, practiced. "Ms. Grande, we've launched an investigation. There appears to have been a mistake, a very serious one. We're still trying to determine how all three infants were declared deceased, but the morgue attendant discovered that your smallest daughter was still alive while preparing the bodies for the funeral home." Tamara's breath caught. Her body was shaking now, but not from grief, something else. Fury, confusion, disbelief. How does that even happen? She demanded. How does a hospital declare a living baby dead? No one answered her, because there was no answer that could make sense of what had just occurred. That's when the alarms went off. Code pink? Repeat, code pink in the NICU. This is not a drill. The voice on the intercom cut through the moment like a blade. Dr. Pence froze. That's the infant abduction alert. The police officer grabbed his radio. The administrator ran to the phone. Tamara's heart seized in her chest. Who took my baby? She cried. Who even knew she was alive? As chaos erupted in the hospital, security footage silently told the story no one had seen coming. A hospital employee, calm, methodical, carrying a specialized infant transport container. His badge read, Dr. Anthony Pence, the husband of the very woman who had just delivered the triplets. And just like that, the story shifted again. What had started as a miracle was now something else entirely. A child presumed dead had come back to life, but her safety was still hanging by a thread. And Tamara Grande, the girl no one believed in, was about to uncover a secret darker than death itself. This was only the beginning. What if the death certificate for your baby was a lie? It was just past midnight when Marlene Davis lit a cigarette beneath the flickering street lamp outside Mercy Hospital. The rain poured down in sheets, blurring the glass doors behind her. She wasn't supposed to be out there. She was supposed to be inside, preparing the bodies of 3 deceased newborn girls for transfer into a funeral home. But something didn't sit right. In her 20 years working in the hospital morgue, she had seen grief in every form, tragedy in every size. But tonight, Utoy, something whispered, this isn't over. Earlier that evening, Dr. Elaine Pence had stood in the delivery room with blood on her gloves and urgency in her voice. The triplets had arrived prematurely, barely 28 weeks. Tamar, our Grande, a 19-year-old mother with no support system, had been barely conscious during delivery. Her body was weak, but her spirit had endured months of judgment, loneliness, and the terrifying prospect of raising 3 babies alone. Doctors rushed in and out, monitors screamed warnings, and decisions were made fast. Too fast. Hours later, the official story was delivered. All 3 infants were declared dead. No one questioned it, except Marlene. As she reached for the smallest infant, body cold, lips still, she saw it. The fingers twitched. A muscle contraction? Nerve reflex? She blinked. Then it happened again. Not an illusion, not a trick. Life. Marlene dropped her cigarette and sprinted inside, soaked in rain and adrenaline. Back in the morgue, she reached into the container and placed her trembling fingers on the infant's chest. There it was, a heartbeat, faint but undeniable. Oh my God, she whispered, dialing for help. Minutes later, chaos erupted. Doctors and nurses scrambled to verify the impossible. One baby, baby A, was alive. Tamara was notified. Barely able to move from her C-section recovery, she was silent at first, then numb, then in disbelief. You told me they were gone, she said through cracked lips. Dr. Pence stood before her, shame in her eyes, saying only, we need to talk. Because what happened next would shake the foundations of Mercy Hospital. Police were called, administration got involved, an investigation was launched. But even amid the chaos, Tamara's mind was fixated on one thing. Her baby was alive. Her baby had been sent to the morgue. Her baby had nearly been buried. How? And the more pressing question, why? Dr. Pence didn't want to say it out loud, but the truth was unraveling fast. The other 2 infants, declared dead without autopsy, had vanished. Surveillance footage revealed something chilling. A man in a lab coat, carrying a specialized medical transport case, walking calmly through the hospital's side entrance. His badge read Dr. Anthony Pence, Elaine's husband. Dr. Anthony Pence was not on duty that night. He was a neonatologist with consulting privileges, not scheduled for anything. But there he was, confidently carrying the smallest infant away from the morgue. The footage showed his eyes locking directly with the camera, unflinching. He wasn't panicked. He was prepared. Tamara sat stunned in her hospital bed as detectives tried to piece together the chain of events. Her baby had been declared dead and stolen. One baby now confirmed alive. the other two missing, and the man responsible was married to the doctor who had delivered them. But the twist didn't stop there. Across town in a suburban home, a private NICU had been built, fully equipped, state-of-the-art, sterile and hidden. There, two premature infants lay in incubators, connected to oxygen, IV lines, and monitors. Beside them stood Dr. Anthony Pence, adjusting vitals and watching over them with eerie calm. "You're safe now," he whispered. "No one's going to hurt you." But what was he protecting them from? The answer began to surface when Detective Riley, reviewing security footage, turned to hospital admin and asked, why were all three infants pronounced dead without proper confirmation? Who authorized it? That's when the name Dr. Gregory Miles emerged. He had signed the death certificates, though he was nowhere to be found. Dr. Miles, it turned out, was connected to a shadow research initiative, an unauthorized experimental trial sponsored by Nevergan Pharmaceuticals. And the targets of these trials? Premature infants from minority and low-income families. Infants deemed non-viable, infants who wouldn't be missed. But these babies were not non-viable. They were very much alive. And Tamara's triplets had narrowly escaped becoming part of something horrifying. The discovery of the living baby in the morgue cracked the silence open. Suddenly, hospital staff were speaking up. Files were disappearing. Emails were being traced. The pieces were coming together. Dr. Pence, guilt written all over her face, told Detective Riley, "There's more going on in this hospital than anyone's willing to admit. Babies are being selected based on race and risk score for treatment that's never been approved. They're calling it compassionate use, but it's not compassion. It's exploitation." And then she said something that chilled everyone in the room. "That's why we took them." We? My husband and I. Tamara, still recovering, listened with a pounding heart as Dr. Pence admitted to falsifying death certificates. Not to harm, but to save. To remove the girls from a system that was preparing them for an unconsented experiment. "We had to move fast," Elaine said. "The protocol was already scheduled to begin. We didn't have time to wait for approval." "But you didn't tell me," Tamara said, voice breaking. "You let me believe they were dead." Elaine's eyes filled with tears. It was the only way to get them out. The fallout began. Detectives raided hospital record rooms. Investigators followed the trail to Nevergan. Doctors who had been silent were subpoenaed. Parents whose babies had died under routine care were contacted. Whistleblowers came forward. The truth could no longer be contained. And it all started with a single twitch in a morgue, a heartbeat that refused to stop, a cigarette that wasn't finished, a morgue attendant who chose to look twice instead of walking away. Because of that moment, a lie was shattered, and three babies who were supposed to disappear became the center of a storm that would expose decades of hidden injustice in the medical system. Tamara Grande's nightmare had just begun, but so had her war, and she would not stop until all her daughters were safe, and the world was forced to reckon with what it almost buried alive. What would you do if the doctor who delivered your babies turned out to be part of a rescue mission no one was supposed to know about? The day Tamara Grande was told that one of her triplets had miraculously survived, everything shifted. The grief she had been suffocating in under gave way to a single burning question. How could this have happened? And more urgently, who had taken the others? As she lay in her hospital bed, barely able to move from her emergency C-section, the sterile air of Mercy Hospital felt heavier than before. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And the woman who had just walked through the door, flanked by a police officer and a hospital administrator, was not just her doctor. She was a link in a chain that connected the greatest pain of her life to a conspiracy no mother should ever have to face. Dr. Elaine Pence had delivered Tamara's triplets. She had held them in her hands, declared them stillborn, and walked away with a face full of solemnity. But now, as she stood at the foot of Tamara's bed, her voice shook, and now not with clinical detachment, but with something closer to confession. "One of your daughters is alive," she said. The words hung in the air like static. Tamara turned her head, eyes hollow, unable to comprehend what she was hearing. "But you said they were gone." "I know what we said," Dr. Pence whispered, her voice cracking. "But there's something you need to know, something none of us ever expected to happen." And then it came. the revelation that sent chills through the room, that caused the officer to tighten his grip on his notepad and the administrator to shift uncomfortably. Dr. Anthony Pence, Elaine's husband, had taken the baby. Not out of malice, but out of fear, urgency, protection. Because the truth was, none of Tamara's daughters had died. All three had shown signs of life, weak but real. And yet, within hours of birth, all had been declared dead. No second opinions, no NICU care, no parental consent. Why? Because they had been selected, targeted, for an experimental protocol with a chilling success rate, 0. Every premature baby enrolled had died. And behind it all stood a powerful pharmaceutical company, a falsified death record, and a shadow operation disguised as medical care. As Tamara tried to process this nightmare wrapped in bureaucracy, more facts unraveled. Anthony Pence, a neonatologist with years of experience and a pristine reputation, had been the one to remove the babies from the hospital before the protocol could begin. He had built a secret neonatal intensive care unit in his home. Incubators, equipment, supplies. It wasn't an abduction, it was a last-ditch rescue. And Elaine? She had known everything. She had delivered the triplets. She had seen their charts, she had seen the red flag. High risk, low viability, eligible for experimental protocol. She had made the decision that no doctor should ever have to make, to falsify their deaths in order to save their lives. Tamara's voice trembled with rage. You let me think they were dead. You let me cry. You let me name ghosts instead of daughters. I did, Elaine replied, tears brimming in her eyes. And I hate myself for it. But I was watching babies die, Tamara, over and over. And no one was listening. Not the board, not the ethics committee, not the administrators. I had no proof, just patterns, just hunches. Until I saw yours. 3 beautiful little girls, all flagged for the same deadly treatment. I couldn't let them go through it. The room fell silent. Then chaos. Security alarms screamed through the hospital corridors. Code pink in the NICU, blared the intercom. Infant abduction alert. This is not a drill. The remaining baby, Jennifer, the smallest, the fighter, was gone. Someone had taken her from the neonatal unit. Elaine froze. That's the abduction alert. The police officer bolted. The administrator began dialing frantically. Tamara, now upright in her bed despite the pain, looked around in panic. Who would take her? Who even knew she was alive? They raced to security footage. There on a screen, a man in a white coat carried a specialized incubator through a back hallway and out a side door. His badge? Dr. Anthony Pence. The same man who had removed the other 2 girls. The room went cold. Tamara collapsed back in her bed. Why? Why would he do this now? No one had answers. But one thing was clear. He had a plan. Elsewhere in the city, in a hidden nursery with medical-grade care, Anthony Pence was preparing for the storm to come. He gently placed Jennifer beside her sisters, Simone and Scarlett, who were already stabilized in their incubators. You're safe now, he whispered. No one can touch you here. But safety was an illusion. Detective Riley pieced together the trail, connected the falsified records, uncovered the suspicious links to Nevergan Pharmaceuticals. And just as he began to understand the scope of the cover-up, one thing became undeniable. Elaine and Anthony Pence were not kidnappers. They were whistleblowers. They were insurgents. And they had gone rogue for one reason, because no one else had listened. Tamara, barely out of surgery, was thrust into a nightmare far more complicated than grief. Her children were alive, but they were hidden, and the people who had saved them were now fugitives. The very hospital that had failed her was now trying to reclaim her babies. Not out of care, but out of damage control. So she made a decision. She left. Alone in a borrowed car, she followed mysterious GPS coordinates sent to her phone. They led to a quiet neighborhood, a large home with a private NICU inside. There, reunited with Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett, Tamara learned the full truth. The protocol was real. The deaths were deliberate. The experiment had been buried under layers of bureaucracy and silence. But her babies had survived. Because someone broke the rules. Because 2 doctors saw them as human. Because someone believed that the system, no matter how powerful, could be challenged. Tamara held her daughters close, realizing that the greatest lie she had ever been told had led to the greatest truth. Her children were never gone. They were just hidden. And now the world would have to answer for it. What would you do if your newborn was stolen in the middle of a hospital lockdown? Tamara Grande had just begun to breathe again. After being told her triplets were dead, the shocking discovery that one of them, her smallest daughter, was alive had cracked open the first sliver of light in the darkest chapter of her life. But that light vanished the second the intercom exploded through Mercy Hospital's halls. Code pink in the NICU. Repeat. Code pink. Infant abduction in progress. Tamara's entire body froze. Still recovering from a C-section, she couldn't move fast enough, but her heart outran her. The baby, the one they told her was dead, then miraculously alive, was gone again. Not to a grave, not to the morgue, but to someone's hands. Someone inside the hospital. Dr. Elaine Pence's face drained of color. "That's the infant abduction alarm," she whispered, her voice thin with panic. Police officers raced to secure the exits. Administrators barked into phones, but in the chaos, no one noticed the quiet security footage playing on the hospital's third monitor, until Detective Riley did. A man in a white coat came, collected, carrying a specialized medical transport case. His hospital badge read, Dr. Anthony Pence, Elaine's husband. He moved with intent, not panic. His steps were practiced, his exit was silent, and he looked directly into the camera as he left. Tamara stared in horror. "That's him," she said, voice shaking. "That's the man who took her." Riley's gut twisted. This wasn't an impulsive kidnapping. This was a continuation. This was the second stage of a plan no one fully understood. Somewhere across the city, in a house no one had permission to enter, Anthony Pence placed the tiny infant next to her sisters. Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett, three girls who had been declared dead and quietly disappeared, were now alive, together, and hidden. A private nursery had been converted into a makeshift NICU, equipped with state-of-the-art monitors, oxygen lines, and a meticulous layout only a skilled neonatologist could build. "You're safe now," Anthony murmured, checking each baby's vitals with a father's tenderness and a doctor's discipline. He wasn't alone. Nurse Janice, the same woman who had assisted during Tamara's delivery, stepped in quietly, her face pale but determined. "How are they doing?" she asked, moving to check the monitors. "Stable," Anthony replied. "The smallest one gave us a scare. I had to move faster than planned." Janice nodded grimly. "The hospital's in chaos. They've started a full police investigation." Anthony looked up. "Then we need to move quickly. We need time to gather evidence." From the shadows, another figure stepped into the room. Dr. Jeff Williams, chief of pediatrics at Mercy Hospital. "What the hell have you done?" he asked, his voice trembling between outrage and disbelief. Anthony stood tall. "We saved them. You falsified records, abducted patients. You've broken every rule in medicine." Janice cut in. "And we did it after exhausting every option. How many reports did we file? How many times did we go to the ethics committee? No one listened. Babies were dying." Williams stared at the monitors. His instincts as a physician fought against the storm in his mind. These weren't dead infants. They were breathing, fighting, living. "Even if you were right," he said quietly, "this isn't how you handle it." "But it's the only way anyone would pay attention," Anthony replied. Then came the bombshell. The hospital board had received an anonymous tip about experimental treatments being performed on premature infants from minority backgrounds without consent. All evidence pointed toward a clinical protocol being funded secretly by a pharmaceutical company named Nevergen. The results? A 100% mortality rate among test subjects. Dr. Marshall's, the man who had officially declared Tamara's triplets dead, was the lead investigator on the trial. His name was on every suspicious chart, and now he was nowhere to be found. Back at the hospital, Detective Riley confronted Dr. Elaine Pence. "Are you telling me your husband took the babies? That they were never dead? That the records were faked?" Elaine nodded, her voice breaking. "We had no choice. We've been watching the data for months. Every premature infant flagged for this protocol didn't make it. And the selection criteria?" She paused, her eyes full of tears. "Race, socioeconomic status, no parental oversight." Tamara gasped. "They targeted us?" "Yes," Elaine whispered. "And I couldn't let it happen again. We didn't want to break the law. We wanted to break the silence." Riley's mind spun. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. He's moving them somewhere safe. We have 48 hours to get at everything. The files, the names, the proof. Then her phone buzzed. A message. Coordinates. A photo of all 3 girls alive in incubators. A promise. 48 hours, then we bring it all to the FBI. Suddenly, the hospital went dark. The power died. The backup generator kicked in, but Elaine was gone. Find her, Riley shouted, and no one noticed Tamara wheeling herself quietly out of her room, a new fire in her chest. She wasn't going to wait. She wasn't going to trust that the system would save her daughters. Not after what they had done. Using a burner phone, she received a text. Your daughters need you. Come alone. Tell no one. Attached, GPS coordinates and a photo of her babies. Alive. Tamara didn't hesitate. She escaped, despite the pain from surgery, despite every warning. She got in a borrowed car and followed the coordinates out of the city. Every mile a war with her own body, every second a battle between hope and fear. I'm coming, she whispered. Mommy's coming. And on the other side of that GPS signal, in a quiet nursery shielded by secrecy, 3 babies waited. Monitors beeped. Life continued. But so did the threat, because Nevergan wasn't finished, and neither was Dr. Miles. What would you do if the people saving your children suddenly had to run for their lives? Tamara Grande had thought the worst was behind her, until she stepped into the home where her triplets were hidden and saw the faces of those who had risked everything to keep them alive. The nursery didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like sanctuary. 3 incubators, 3 fragile lives, 3 tiny chests rising and falling with each mechanical breath. Her daughters, Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett, were here, alive, connected to tubes and wires, but safe. And now, for the first time, Tamara was seeing all of them together. But that moment of peace shattered in an instant. It began with a knock. Soft. Too soft. Anthony Pence turned toward the nursery door, already tense. Nurse Janice stepped back, her breath caught in her throat. A new figure entered the room, one that Anthony and Janice both recognized instantly. Dr. Jeff Williams, Chief of Pediatrics at Mercy Hospital. An ally, or so they had thought. What have you 2 done, he asked, not with curiosity, but with quiet rage. Anthony didn't flinch. We saved them. Williams stepped toward the incubators, his doctor's instincts taking over as he checked vitals. Even if that's true, Anthony, you've committed medical treason. You forged death certificates. You abducted patients. Do you understand what you've done to that poor mother? I do, Anthony said, meeting his eyes. But we had no choice. Janice's voice cracked with emotion. We tried to go through the system. You know we did. You were there when we filed the reports, when we begged the ethics committee to listen. No one believed us. No one wanted to look. Williams's face softened, but only for a moment. The timing is bad. The hospital board just received an anonymous tip. There's going to be a full investigation into experimental drug use on infants from minority backgrounds. Anthony and Janice looked at each other in alarm. Nevergan? Anthony asked. Yes, Williams confirmed, his expression grave. And Dr. Miles' name is all over it. The room turned cold. Williams continued. They've been targeting premature babies, minority babies, classifying them as non-viable, and enrolling them into a trial that doesn't exist on paper. No consent, no oversight. Just data points and death certificates. Tamara's knees gave way. Janice caught her just in time. You're saying my babies would have been next? Williams nodded slowly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Anthony stepped in. We had to get them out. Faking their deaths was the only way. Before anyone could speak again, the computer next to the incubators beeped with a low oxygen warning. Anthony quickly adjusted the settings. They're still so fragile, he whispered. We can't move them again, not unless we absolutely have to. But they would have to, because the enemy was already coming. Back at Mercy Hospital, Detective Riley stared at the records flooding into his hands. Patient files, mortality stats, drug names, all pointing to one terrifying reality. Premature infants were being used as experimental subjects under the guise of compassionate care. And the drug in question had never been approved by the FDA. Its side effects were severe. Its trial results, buried. And the test subjects, always chosen from families with the least power to fight back. An email recovered from the hospital server spelled it out in chilling detail. Nevergan was seeking candidates with minimal parental interference and limited socioeconomic resources. They weren't saving lives. They were calculating silence. And Tamara's daughters had been next. Suddenly, Riley's phone buzzed. A new message. A photograph of the triplets in their incubators. A note, 48 hours. Then we go to the FBI. Protect them until then. But before he could respond, the hospital's power cut out. Files began disappearing. Elaine Pence had vanished, and the mother, Tamara, was gone too. The clock had started ticking. Back at the safe house, Anthony was preparing backup plans. He opened the garage, revealing 3 portable incubators and a modified van equipped for emergency neonatal transport. "If they come here," he said quietly, "we move." Tamara protested. "Move them where? They're premature. They won't survive another relocation." "We have a private clinic ready, a friend of Dr. Williams, off the grid." Then came the sound that would change everything. Glass breaking. Anthony lunged for the security system, pulling up camera feeds. "They're here," he said, his voice cold. 2 men, suits, no IDs, and a black SUV with no plates. "Nevergen security," Janice whispered. "Someone must have talked." Williams opened the blinds just enough to confirm. "We're out of time." Anthony grabbed a go bag and began prepping the portable incubators. "Janice," he ordered, "take Tamara and the babies through the basement exit. Get to the van. I'll stall them." Tamara's voice broke. "You're not coming with us?" Anthony gave her a look that said more than words ever could. "Protect them." A loud thud came from downstairs. The front door burst open. 2 men in black suits entered the house. "Doctor." Williams blocked their path. "You don't belong here." One of the men flashed a badge. "Those infants are hospital property. We're here to retrieve them for proper care." "They're human beings," Williams shouted. Behind him, Tamara and Janice moved the babies one by one, securing them into the van. But the men were closing in. One of them pulled a gun. Tamara screamed. Dr. Williams lunged. Anthony cut the lights. Darkness fell over the house. Janice pulled Tamara through a hidden bookshelf door and down the stairs. In the chaos, a single gunshot rang out. Tamara's blood ran cold. "Was that?" "Keep moving," Janice hissed. "We don't have time." In the garage, they loaded the babies into the van. As Janice fired up the engine, another door burst open. One of the security men, gun drawn. He shouted. He fired. The rear window shattered but missed. They sped into the night. Tamara turned to the 3 incubators behind her, each one trembling with the road's rhythm. Her daughters, her miracles. And now they were fugitives too. "Where are we going?" she asked. "There's a private clinic," Janice answered, voice tight. 40 minutes out. They're expecting us." Tamara reached into her pocket and clutched the flash drive Dr. Williams had given her. It held the truth. But would it be enough? Behind them, the men from Nevergan regrouped. And in a dark SUV somewhere on the highway, Dr. Gregory Miles watched his phone buzz with rage. They've escaped. But he hadn't given up. Not even close. Because in his mind, those infants were never Tamara's. They were his legacy, and he was coming to reclaim them. What if your rescue exposed a conspiracy bigger than anyone expected, and the people behind it were still watching? For the first time in weeks, Tamara Grande could breathe, barely. Her triplets, Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett, were finally reunited inside Dr. Chen's private NICU, tucked safely inside state-of-the-art incubators, surrounded by specialists who saw them not as research subjects, but as human beings. The quiet beeps of heart monitors echoed like lullabies in the sterile, peaceful room. Jennifer, the miracle baby who opened her eyes in the morgue. Simone, the fighter who nearly lost oxygen in the van. Scarlett, the strongest who had survived abduction and pursuit. They were alive. They were here, and they were hers. But as Detective Riley paced outside the NICU glass, phone to his ear, Tamara knew the war wasn't over. "They found Dr. Williams," he said grimly when he returned. "Alive, but barely. Gunshot wound to the chest. He's in surgery at Mercy Hospital." Tamara blinked. "The same hospital that declared my daughters dead?" Riley nodded. "The irony isn't lost on me." The hits kept coming. There had been a fire at the Pence residence, the very home where Anthony had risked everything to hide the babies. The entire makeshift NICU had gone up in flames. Arson was suspected, but nothing could be proven yet. They're erasing the evidence, Janice said, her voice shaking with restrained fury. But they hadn't erased everything. Riley's team had discovered an external hard drive in an air vent in Elaine and Anthony's bedroom. The data was damning: infant mortality rates broken down by race, doctor assignments, and notes from secret meetings between Nevergan executives and certain hospital staff. But it wasn't enough. They needed direct evidence of the clinical trials. Tamara's hand flew to her pocket. The flash drive. Dr. Williams had given it to her during the chaos, telling her it held everything. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out and handed it to Riley. "This," she said, "it has what you need." He took it reverently. "We'll analyze this immediately." Just as relief began to settle in, a nurse burst into the room. "Dr. Chen, there's someone at the staff entrance. She has 2 premature infants. She says their sister is already here." Tamara's breath caught. Jennifer and Simone. They rushed down the corridor, and there she was, Dr. Elaine Pence, disheveled and trembling, cradling 2 portable incubators. She was alive, and she'd brought the girls home. "Tamara," she whispered. "They're safe. They're all safe now." Elaine collapsed into a chair, her body shaking from exhaustion, adrenaline, and grief. Janice threw her arms around her. "We thought you were gone." Tamara didn't speak. She couldn't. She simply rushed to the incubators, checking vital signs, whispering prayers, and touching the clear plastic like it was glass from heaven. "How did you get them back?" Riley asked Elaine. She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "Anthony followed the SUV. When they stopped to switch vehicles, he created a diversion. There was gunfire. I don't know if he made it." Silence fell. Dr. Anthony Pence, who had delivered the triplets, faked their death certificates, and protected them at every turn, was missing, possibly dead. Riley moved fast. "Where exactly did this happen?" he asked, already signaling his officers to trace the SUV. Dr. Chen supervised the reintegration of Jennifer and Simone into the NICU, placing them beside Scarlett. For the first time, all 3 girls were breathing together again. Monitors chirped in harmony. Their chests rose and fell. They were alive. They were strong, and they were fighters. But peace was short-lived. Sonia Reynolds stepped into the clinic just hours later. Elegant, composed, haunted. Tamara tensed. "Who are you?" "My name is Sonia Reynolds," she said softly. "I was Dr. Gregory Miles's partner and Nevergan's lead corporate attorney. I'm here because I know what he did, and I want to help you stop the people still behind this." Everyone froze. Riley moved toward her cautiously. "Why now?" "Because I've seen enough," Sonia said, "and I've brought proof." She handed Riley a thick envelope. Inside were documents implicating the highest levels of Nevergan's board, offshore accounts, approval memos, direct orders to suppress adverse results and greenlight unauthorized trials on infants of color, under the justification that low parental oversight would prevent lawsuits. "I'm willing to testify," Sonia added, "but we'll need protection. They'll come after me and Tamara." Tamara instinctively moved closer to her daughter's incubators. "You think we're still in danger?" "I know you are," Sonia said, "because I was once the one they trusted to keep secrets like this buried." Riley didn't wait. He ordered immediate federal protection. But even that couldn't stop the chill that ran through the room when Janice asked, "Where is Dr. Miles now?" Sonia hesitated. "I don't know," she admitted. "But if he's alive, he's not done." The entire clinic went on lockdown. Still, the girls were safe for now. Later that night, Tamara sat in the NICU watching over her daughters. She whispered their names like prayers. Jennifer, Simone, Scarlett. These weren't just names. They were proof that love, courage, and truth could defy even death. What if the very system meant to protect your own children was secretly plotting to erase them permanently? Hours after reuniting all 3 of her daughters, Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett, Tamara Grande still hadn't let go of their incubators. Her fingers rested against the clear plastic like a shield, as if her touch alone could protect them. In Dr. Chen's private NICU, the triplets were finally side by side, monitored by specialists, cared for with dignity, and no longer seen as expendable subjects. But safety was fleeting in a world where power buried its secrets beneath surgical gloves and corporate signatures. Detective Riley was already moving fast. With Sonia Reynolds, the former Nevergen legal counsel, now cooperating, he had both the flash drive from Dr. Williams and a folder full of internal corporate records exposing unethical drug trials. Names, timelines, patient profiles. The evidence was damning, and yet Tamara could feel it. The war wasn't over. Not yet. She sat quietly in the corner of the NICU, watching her daughter sleep. Her body still ached from the C-section. Her mind spun from the trauma of losing and recovering her babies. But beneath all of it was a rising tide of something deeper. Resolve. Riley entered, his expression grim. They found Dr. Anthony Pence. Tamara stood so fast the chair nearly tipped. Is he alive? In surgery, critical condition, Riley said. But he made it. He saved the girls. Tears blurred Tamara's vision. Anthony had risked everything, his career, his freedom, his life, to expose what Mercy Hospital in Nevergen had buried. He had followed the SUV alone, intercepted it mid-transfer, and rescued Jennifer and Simone under gunfire. Janice let out a breath she'd been holding. And Dr. Williams? Stable, awake, Riley confirmed. He's asked to speak to you when you're ready. Tamara nodded, her hand never leaving Scarlett's incubator. But the next visitor brought a different kind of tension. Sonia Reynolds returned, carrying paperwork and a proposal. She had spent her life inside Nevergen's inner circles, and now she wanted to dismantle them from the inside. Her offer? Financial support for Tamara and her daughters, legal counsel, and a trust fund for their future. No strings, no publicity. Tamara hesitated. Why? Because I spent 30 years defending the indefensible, Sonia replied. This is the first right thing I've done in a long time. The conversation was interrupted by Riley's phone. He stepped away, speaking quietly, then returned with fire in his eyes. Dr. Miles has escaped federal custody. The room froze. He was being transported to a secure facility, Riley continued, used his credentials, slipped away during transfer. He's gone. Wow, Tamara felt the floor shift beneath her. He's watching us, Janice whispered. I can feel it. Security at the clinic was increased. Federal agents surrounded the property. No one entered or exited without clearance. But the threat wasn't just physical, it was political. Sonia explained that Nevergen's board included former FDA officials, hospital executives, and venture capitalists. They had the power to erase records, discredit whistleblowers, and disappear witnesses. They'd done it before, and they would try again. Later that night, a nurse entered the NICU with a worried look. Duchen, there's a package at the gate, no return address. Security brought it in. Inside, a manila envelope containing photos. Photos of Jennifer, Simone, Scarlett, taken from outside the clinic window. No note, no fingerprints, just proof. Proof that someone had been watching. Tamara's stomach turned. We have to go. They're coming. But where could they go? Sonia stepped forward. There's a property I own through a trust. Remote, secure, untraceable. I can move you tonight, Dr. Chen agreed. The girls are strong enough for short transport. But we need to do it quietly. By midnight, Tamara and her daughters were loaded into a specialized medical van. Dr. Chen's team provided mobile NICU support. Janice drove. Sonia followed in a separate car. Riley coordinated the route with law enforcement. Every stoplight, every turn was calculated. The convoy moved like a whisper through the dark. Hours later, they arrived at a secluded lakeside cottage surrounded by trees and silence. Inside, the nursery had already been prepared. 3 incubators, emergency supplies, and enough medical equipment to stabilize the babies for weeks. Tamara stood in the doorway, stunned. This is home, Sonia said softly. Tamara stepped inside, carrying Jennifer in her arms. She had run from the hospital. From bullets, from corruption, but she had not run from love. This was for them. The triplets were placed gently in their cribs, monitors humming quietly. Janice checked vitals. Dr. Chen stayed for the first night to oversee their transition. And for the first time in months, Tamara laid down. Not in a hospital bed, not in a van, but in a home. Her home. She stared at the ceiling, the sounds of the lake outside mixing with the breath of 3 babies who had refused to die. But just as sleep began to claim her, the baby monitor crackled. Scarlett had stirred. Tamara stood, moved to the crib, and saw something she'd never forget. Scarlett's tiny hand reaching toward her, fingers stretching in the air, as if to say, "I'm still here, we all are." She picked her up, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "My little warrior," she whispered. "You brought us through fire. What would you do if your children were safe, but the people who tried to kill them were still free?" Tamara Grande didn't sleep that night. In the quiet sanctuary of the lakeside cottage, with moonlight streaming through the nursery windows and the steady beeping of monitors echoing like lullabies, her body rested, but her mind stayed alert. Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett were finally together, their tiny bodies slowly gaining strength after being hunted, hidden, and nearly lost to a monstrous conspiracy. They were safe for now, but Tamara Moss knew the storm wasn't over. The next morning, the cottage came alive with movement. Dr. Elaine Pence arrived early, her face weary but warm, gently checking vitals and adjusting medications. Detective Riley followed not long after, carrying a sealed evidence envelope and updates from the FBI. Janice brewed coffee while glancing at her phone every few minutes. Everyone was working, watching, waiting. Tamara sat near the cribs, watching her daughter sleep. Jennifer, the miracle baby who opened her eyes in the morgue. Simone, the middle child who almost didn't survive the van chase. And Scarlett, the strongest, who had never stopped fighting. They were her miracles, her anchor in a world turned upside down. Riley spoke first. "Dr. Anthony Pence made it through surgery. He's in stable condition and asking to see you when you're ready." Relief flickered in Tamara's eyes. "And Dr. Williams?" "Recovering awake. He's helping federal agents review evidence now." Tamara nodded. "And Miles?" Riley's face darkened. "Still missing." Those three words sucked the warmth from the room. Gregory Miles, who signed the death certificates, who falsified records, who authorized illegal drug trials on premature infants, was still at large. A man who had once worn a white coat of trust was now the ghost haunting every breath Tamara took. But it was Sonia Reynolds, the former Nevergen attorney turned whistleblower, who brought the next wave of clarity. "I've compiled every document I could access," she said, placing a thick folder on the kitchen table. "Names, financials, personal emails. This goes straight to the top. Nevergen's CEO, several board members, and 2 former FDA officials." She paused, her voice quieter. "But it won't matter if we can't keep your daughter safe." Tamara leaned in. "Are we still in danger?" "Yes," Sonia said simply. "The media doesn't know the whole story. The public doesn't know. But they do, and the people behind this will do anything to avoid exposure. You and your girls. You're the last piece they can't control." That afternoon, a federal agent delivered updated security plans. Riley had requested additional marshals. Sonia had hired a private security team. Cameras were installed throughout the property. The cottage now felt more like a fortress. Still, Tamara couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. She had lived under threat for so long, it had become a sixth sense, one that flared every time a shadow moved or a floorboard creaked. But the girls needed her present, so she focused on the moments, reading to them in soft whispers, singing lullabies her grandmother once sang to her, feeding them one by one with trembling, grateful hands. Later that evening, while Janice was preparing dinner and Dr. Elaine napped in the guest room, Sonia returned from a call with the Department of Justice. "They're moving forward with indictments," she announced, "but they need one more testimony. Yours." Tamara froze. "Me?" "You're the mother," Sonia explained. "The person who was lied to, manipulated, and nearly destroyed. You saw what this system did. You named the babies. You buried them in your mind. And then you fought to get them back. You are the heart of this case." Tamara stood still for a long moment. She wasn't a doctor. She wasn't a detective. She wasn't a lawyer or a CEO. She was just a 19-year-old girl who had been abandoned, underestimated, and ignored. But she had also become something else, a survivor, a mother, a warrior. "I'll do it," she said. "Whatever it takes." That night, Detective Riley set up a camera in the study. Tamara sat down, eyes red but steady, and began to speak. She told everything, her pregnancy, the hospital visit, the moment she was told all 3 babies had died. She spoke about the casket, the morgue, the voice on the phone saying one baby was still alive. She spoke about the chase, the betrayal, the fight to keep her daughters breathing. And then she said the line that would echo across newsrooms and courtrooms weeks later. They tried to erase them. But my daughters are not disposable. They are not data. They are not experiments. They are human. And they are alive because someone chose to break the rules and do what was right. Her words didn't shake. Her tears didn't fall. She was stronger than any courtroom. The next morning, the media got the story. The headlines hit like a storm. Triplets declared dead, found alive. Hospital and pharma giant under fire. Whistleblower reveals shocking conspiracy at Mercy Hospital. Mother's courage exposes secret drug trials on premature minority infants. The world finally saw what Tamara had lived, and people were outraged. Federal agents stormed Nevergan's headquarters. The CEO was arrested boarding a private jet to Dubai. Multiple executives resigned. 3 doctors surrendered their licenses. Dozens of lawsuits were filed. The FDA opened a historic investigation. But for Tamara, the real victory happened in a quiet room with beeping monitors, where 3 tiny girls held on to life and gave it back to her in return. By the time the sun set over the lake, Tamara was no longer just a mother. She was a witness, a voice, a legacy. Jennifer, Simone, and Scarlett were more than survivors. They were symbols. And now, finally, the world was watching. In a world where institutions sometimes fail the very people they are meant to protect, the greatest power we hold is our voice and our refusal to give up. Tamara Grande's story is more than a medical scandal or a thriller. It's a reminder that when systems become corrupt, it is often ordinary people armed with extraordinary courage who bring about change. Her fight to save her daughters wasn't backed by wealth, status, or influence. It was powered by instinct, resilience, and the unyielding belief that her children mattered. This story teaches us that silence enables injustice. When you sense something is wrong, speak. When you see others being harmed, act. You don't need to be an expert to demand truth. You don't need permission to protect what you love. It also reminds us that sometimes justice doesn't come through force. It comes through endurance, through documentation, through showing up over and over, even when you're tired. Whether you're a parent, a professional, or simply someone trying to navigate a broken world, this story is your wake-up call. Never underestimate your own power. When truth is buried, it takes courage to dig it back up. Be that courage. Let Tamara's fight inspire your own.